On today's video, I speak to Tom Milson. Tom is a head teacher at Eagle House School, which is a specialist therapeutic provision for children with a joint diagnosis of SEMH and ASC. We speak about what it was like growing up for Tom, what made him want to become a teacher, what mainstream schools could be doing better, and what it's been like for his school during the pandemic. Hey guys, and welcome to another video and special episode of the special series called the Autism Connection Series 2, which is on MaxiAspie. Today I have a really special guest. I actually met him up in Brighton when I was doing a speech just before the pandemic. We haven't seen each other since, but we've spoken ever since, and he is a headmaster of a school, and his name is Tom Milson. Thank you, obviously, Tom, for coming on and on the second series of the Autism Connections now and speaking to me. I know you're probably very busy. There hasn't really been a lockdown for yourself, but obviously being a headmaster and I suppose having to put in new rules and regulations to help the students at your school, I can imagine it's probably been a good stressful year and a bit.
Definitely, yeah.
But thank you as well, just for coming on really and sparing your time to speak to me. I suppose my first question is, and I ask this to everybody that comes on, what is your connection to autism?
I think my connection to autism started when I was in my first year of teaching, and I really had never really encountered any training in autism during my in my teacher training, and I had a few children in my class that had special needs, and I didn't really I didn't feel like I understood enough about my own class, and nothing had really prepared me for that. And so one of my lecturers at uni said to me, come back and do some extra training and do your postgraduate, your master's in special needs. And I was kind of interested by that because there was a module on understanding the autistic spectrum, and I just was absolutely blown away by how much I've missed from not understanding such a huge segment of our population. And I couldn't believe it because what was really interesting about it was they actually led it in a special school, and the 4 days that I spent, it was 4 solid days just doing one module. I got to spend it in a classroom, got to meet children in a special school and spend like a morning with them as well. It really taught me so much about my own practice and how I was making some really basic errors, and how just by tweaking a few bits and pieces that I would normally do, or emphasizing a few bits about my teaching, that I could really help the kids in my class. And that's where it kind of started for me. And I very quickly, from finishing my own studies, I knew I wanted to go into working in special school, and that's where I've been kind of ever since, and absolutely loved it. I think that it just hooked me, and the imagination and the difference you can make, and when you really do understand and put into practice, and really listen to the kids that you're teaching, it's really powerful. And I think it just amazed me at how I could do that for my career, and move from just mainstream and help kids that need it most, really.
I mean, what would you say like the main sort of differences was from special SEND school can offer instead of a secondary or primary mainstream school?
I think it's creativity, and I think that when I think about my early days of being in a special school, you've got so much more control over the environment, and you can do so much more, offer so many more opportunities for young people in a special school, just because you've got the resources there available to you. You know, having smaller class sizes, you can you've got more control over the group. You can spend a little bit more time emphasizing the routines. It is, there's always challenges, you know, there's always differences. You know, I know that the kids in my class that had autism in mainstream, they had so many more opportunities to engage their peers, and their peers could almost regulate themselves better at times, and I could see where that was really supportive. But actually, they are still one within 30, and you know, being one young person within 30 is a huge demand to place on kids with autism. And I think that there's a few things I've read where, you know, where kids with autism have grown up and said that they just gave up on their classmates because they didn't understand them, and they ended up almost drawing into themselves. And that's, for me, I think that's one of the worst things that I'd ever want for a child, not to feel like they can't be included. And even saying that, I remember there were moments when I was teaching in mainstream where one of my kids that was diagnosed just used to hide under the table, or just try and get away from all the noise, the chaos that just comes from naturally being in a mainstream classroom in a busy, quite chaotic environment when you've got one teacher and the whole group. So I think that it's not perfect in SEND by any stretch of the imagination, but you're able to control the environment a little bit more than you are in mainstream, I think.
No, I completely agree. I mean, from going to a mainstream secondary school which had a ASD unit, they were still very limited on what they could actually offer, because they're still in the realms and the rules of this mainstream school, you know. As when I went to the school that, as you know, with John, as you say, it was smaller classrooms, and I think teachers are able to give that one-to-one sort of time, and their I suppose their patience, their time, you know, I think they're able to offer that a lot more, because they don't have to, as you say, you know, it's no longer 1 in 30, it's 1 in 6, or it's 1 in, you know, which creates more flexibility and allows actually some change in that environment to actually happen. You know, when you're fighting against the system constantly, it can become a bit of a, you know, tiresome kind of task. As you know, when you've got a special school, your whole kind of format is, I think, of course you want the kids to get the grades, of course you want them to do well, but your main and your main sole purpose is to make sure that that child comes to school happy and he leaves happy, and you know, she goes on to do well, not maybe academically, but definitely emotionally and mentally. You know, I know how hard you work. Obviously, you know, you've done very well. You've gone to university. You've got your qualifications that you need in. You've kind of went up the ladder all the way to become a head teacher of where you are now. How does that sort of differ for you, you know, from being in the classroom? I suppose now it's more, you know, making sure, I suppose, everybody's doing the right things and doing the things that you were doing. How does it sort of differ for you now?
That's a big question.
I'm good at them.
Yeah, you are. It is different. I think that the one thing that I think I really enjoyed when I was in mainstream was being really available to my kids and getting to know them really well. And I think that it is harder as a head teacher to get to know your kids individually. But I think that by making myself available and getting to, you know, by making the most of those smaller opportunities, like, you know, whether it's seeing them at lunchtime or seeing them in their classrooms, and just continuing that conversation on. And usually, you know, the time I'm most involved with my kids is when they're starting school, or going to see them in their, you know, current setting, wherever that might be. But remembering things about my individual kids in my school and chatting to them about them quite regularly. One of my kids today just absolutely blew me away. Like, I was so shocked. Like, we had a conversation over lunch on Friday about Pokemon, and I just shared that I play Pokemon and these are my favorites. And I was thinking back to when I used to play on my, on my DS, and how I, was naming things that were from different series. But he was trying to teach me like about the Pokemon that he was catching at the moment. And then he just this morning gave me this picture done at the weekend of, this is what you're looking for on Pokemon Go. You want to collect this, 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 and that. And I think that there's still those little moments that I get like that remind me of why I've kind of got into this kind of work, and why I want to do this, work with the kids that I do. It's not all as easy. And I know that one of the things I have to do is rely on the people that I have in my school. And I will always openly say, John, Fred, or Sarah better than I do. And I know you've got a better relationship. So I think this might work for them based on what I know, what I've seen, what I've studied. But do tell me if I'm wrong, tell me if you've got a better idea, because, I know that for many of my kids, they'll spend 25, 30 hours a week with one person who will just know straight away if they're getting heightened or upset or angry, or if I'll say the wrong word or introduce the wrong thing. I think that's harder to know as a head teacher. And that's why I have to put a lot of trust in the people that we have in the school, that they will know those things about the kids, and then they'll share them with me. Like, don't talk about this because that is a real trigger. There's Pokemon's a big one for a couple of my kids, that you don't mention it in the classroom, but do talk about this because that will really engage them. So I think that's the big thing that's changed. I think it's making the most for me of the little opportunities that I have, and making the time for that. Like, I eat with my kids every single day. When I set up my school, that was the one thing that I said we needed to do, to our group, was to have a shared meal where we all sit together. Everyone in the school eats with the class, and I try and COVID bubbles like pending, and I'd have to be really careful with where I'm at in the school each week. But I do eat with my kids every day still, and it's where you really get to know them and get to know a little bit more about them, and it's trying to keep that going even in the midst of COVID.
I think you're right. And sometimes if you have that sort of disassociation from staff, you might feel more comfortable to tell, sir something rather than, someone that's there all the time, or have those sort of more informal conversations. I think, as you say, it's the small things sometimes that make all the difference. Just a simple act of, okay, when we eat, we're all going to eat together, and it's just simple things like that. It builds that routine, it builds those relationships, it builds those bonds. I mean, I suppose it does follow on to my next question. How is sort of COVID? How has it affected, I suppose, the school and how you sort of do things at the moment?
I think it's made it a lot harder. I think that what's made it harder is that we've tried to keep things as normal as we could for the kids. The decision was made by the government that any child with an HCP could attend school as normal, and we never closed. And I think I worked out as 200 days we stayed open for non-stop from January right the way through, because we just didn't stop for half term or for Easter or for the summer half term either. Just tried to make sure we're open and available for our kids when they needed it. And though that was really important and really powerful, I think that the impact that had on the staff was quite significant in not just that we remained open, but that staff obviously had a lot of stuff going on personally. Like, they had their own kids at home, or they had their own family stuff going on, or they had people pass away. And I think that's been the big thing, because this isn't a job that working in a special school isn't a job that anyone can do if you're ever not 100%. And what we've really had to kind of learn together is that we're not always going to be 100% all the time, but more than usual. And we've had to have a lot more trust in each other and saying, actually, no, I just can't do it this today or this afternoon. I've got too much going on at home. Please help me. And I think that's one of the things that we've tried to do for our kids, is to stay strong and stay open. But it's also meant we've had to look after each other a lot more, because it's like I said, it's not a job you can do when you've got that going on externally, and those other ways you'd normally relax. We've got opposite work. We've got a lovely place. It's our local village pub, which serves the most amazing burgers and food and roast dinners, and not having that, even that social thing you can do after work or at the weekend or whenever it be, it's really difficult to try and replicate that. So I think it's been really thinking about how we can support our kids through it, because I mean, you'll know yourself from, there's so much in the news that is quite scary, and our kids do latch onto that. So it's been really concrete and really really supportive for the kids, and saying, actually, no, let's look at BBC News. Let's not read Facebook. Let's see exactly what's happening. Let's see what the advice is. Right, we're washing our hands. We're just making sure we've got masks on or distancing. It's that kind of thing to really reassure and help the kids. And if they're having a particularly difficult time, to support them through that, with a view that it will end eventually.
I think that's it. It's like, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know, when that will be, because we don't know. If you just said to me, when we were up in Brighton that weekend, that I'm going to be speaking to you, Tom, over a video camera because I can't interview people in person, and I would have probably said, no, that's not going to happen. But here we are. I mean, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I mean, I did make a video on YouTube that said, I think during the pandemic, obviously no one's ever going to understand how autism affects someone fully, until they're in that person's mind, in those person's shoes. I thought, what I think the pandemic people could take away from is, I don't think there's been any time where someone could actually have some of the feelings of what someone with autism might have. Like, for instance, we know the employment rate for people with autism is only 16%, hasn't changed in 10 years. People are losing their jobs left, right and centre at the moment. So for me, I'm thinking, okay, so people are feeling very uncertain about their jobs. People want to socialise, but they can't because of the rules. Autistic people want to socialise, but they don't necessarily know how to. A lot of people are feeling lonely. They're on their own, so they can't see their friends or family. So I don't know if you agree or not, but when the pandemic started, I actually thought, if there's any time where someone could actually go, what does it feel like to be autistic? We could probably draw back, okay, it's probably 10% of how you felt in lockdown, and maximise it, I suppose that does lead me on to my next question then. Like, so what support measures do you and your school, put in place that necessarily a mainstream school or people that aren't very aware of SEND might not be doing?
I mean, I want to go straight away and say we put a lot of emphasis on the power of relationships and about really understanding and really communicating with our young people. I think mainstream schools do that, and they do that very well with the resources they have. But I think having, in my school, having 4 adults that all they do is think about you as 4 children, and they're each carrying different parts of you, and they really want to understand, and they'll talk to each other all the time and keep that going. They want to absolutely get it perfect. And I think that being able to really understand and really build those relationships up does transform and does change our young people for the better. I think that's probably the most important thing, and that filters through to everything that we do, whether it's engaging, like we said, at lunchtime and having that shared experience, or whether it's going on trips out, whether it's understanding what's going to work for them in maths that's going to be different to English, that's going to get them to write, that knowing what motivates them and thinking about what job they might want in the future, and then having that conversation, because it is never going to come from me, but that conversation about what job they might want, and how if they want that job, they might have to go to college, and if they want to get into college, they're going to have to start really focusing on their maths, because that's what's going to help them. And those conversations have to happen all day, every day. And you can only have those conversations, I think, if you really know someone and trust someone, and you built that kind of rapport up. So I think for me, it's the relationships, but I think the flexibility in the curriculum is what SEND schools offer, that we really focus on basically 4 things. We focus on maths and English, obviously, because we know that I know so many young people that desperately wanted to get into college, but college will often say they want a qualification in maths and English. And I know that's the one thing that's going to give my kids at school that really fulfilling life if they can get into college for the first time and actually move on in towards their aspirations. But then we focus a lot on PSHE. And we teach PSHE every day because we know that's something that our kids find hard, having those social interactions, but they're so good at it. Like today I saw a PSHE lesson where they were debating how the internet and how traffic is filtered depending on what they search for, and how they might only see content that applies to them, and how they have to be really careful about reading things all the time that basically cookies or whatever want to show them, and they were so good at that, but they need to be really aware of that stuff because they could easily fall into those traps of just believing what they see on Facebook or in the news. So trying to teach them that. And the final thing we focus on is life skills. And I think there's nothing more important than that for our kids. We teach all our kids to swim, we teach them to cycle, we teach them all, to have friends and to fall out with their friends in a good way, and then to make friends again, which is really hard, I think, for any any person. So particularly for a young person with additional needs, I think is a really good skill to have, but always with that view of trying to get them ready for future life. So
yeah, I think that was one thing that my school did do well, was the whole life skills element.
Yeah.
We were actually shown how to write our CV. We were shown what a bank statement would look like when we get it, and things of that. I always say, don't get me wrong, education is really important, but if I get to the age of 24 where I can tell you how many wives Henry VIII had, but I can't write a CV, or I'm a bit where the priorities somewhere have sort of got lost. I suppose another question I had, just because not long ago I saw a tweet, and it was someone who was promoting an event for autism, and she basically said, all experts welcome. And a parent commented on the tweet going, can parents join? And the person said, no, sorry, professionals only. And it's always stuck with me. And I just want to get your sort of thoughts on it, because I actually really believe that parents are probably the most unused resource that there is. And I just wanted to sort of get your view on it, really. I mean, how do you find that? Do you believe that? And is it sometimes hard, I suppose, to approach the parents because of, how to say it or how to bring it up?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good point. So there's a few things I want to say in that. I think first, the school I work for, we're part of a group, but I think that the one strength that our school group has is that our CEO is a parent of a young person with autism who's now an adult with autism. And I think that every time that we talk about policies or ways of presenting the school, even like today, when we met, she was saying, I always think about how I would see this as a parent and how I want my child to kind of be treated in school. And I think that that's why I fell in love with, the group that I work for, because, which is Eagle House Group, because it is parent run, and, two of the most senior people in the organization, they've both got, children who've got autism, who've grown up and are now adults and living, with independence and in jobs. It's that bit that they can see the end of the story, so they know what the start of the story needs to look like. And they've been through that hard battle of trying to find the right school for their young people. It's why they set, the schools up originally. So I think for me, whenever I do any work, the universities, or any ever talk to any, trainee teachers about autism, but any area of SEND, I always start with, the parents are the expert. It's one of my interview questions, actually, for teaching assistants and for teachers, who would you consult? And we've got a little list of who they go to. And it is always that one that some people just don't think of. They'll name speech therapists, occupational therapists, doctors. And I'm always waiting for them to say, and the parents, because if I think of my teaching assistants who are with the kids, 25 hours, 30 hours a week, and I consider them to be some of the most foremost experts in the kids. Parents who are with them all the time, they know so much more, that they'll know inside out, upside down, exactly what's going to be perfect, what's not going to be perfect. And I know that when I was a teacher, I would happily have long conversations with each of my families because of the kids that I taught, because they really helped me. They really helped me to understand. And it's that balance to teaching that you have to take, the parents' experience and what would work, but then work together to get it right. So it might be that you can't do exactly what they want you to do because it works at home, because you've got to balance out, you've got a class full of kids, and there's other things you can do and there's some things you can't do. But it's knowing that and having that trusting relationship that is really important. And I'd agree. I think they are the foremost experts in their kids. They will know what will work, and the trust has to come in that working together. So we do a lot of parent work with our families. We do a lot of workshops with our parents together, and I think that just as parents can help us, we can help the parents and help get things right at home and suggest things that help. Because so many times, when I hear of families, the one most important thing will be if their kid can go to bed on time. That will change their family life. Let's really work on that, and it might not affect the school day per se, or whatever you'd say about that, but do you know what? It will, because if they get to bed on time, they'll be in school in a much better frame of mind. They won't be grumpy, they won't be falling asleep, they won't be resistant to trying new things in English or whatever. So it is that bit where you've got to really work together. Otherwise it's never going to work. So you have to. I think, yeah, it's interesting that they said that, though. I think that's I think there's a bit of a fear sometimes in involving the parents that much in conferences and events. And I know that there's a couple of National Statistics Society events I've been to where they have actively involved the parents and had the parents. And it's hard as a teacher to be, to sometimes want that safe space, but parents are deeply understanding. I think that's what we've got to realize, that they've been through it. They've had the really, really tough days. They've had the moments where they've, felt things were impossible, just as our teachers have at sometimes. So it's recognizing that we want the best for the kids, and parents that can see that, I think that's when the trust really comes.
So yeah, I think you're right, but I think, again, as you say, we're sort of scared to have those conversations because there are some people that don't want the diagnosis, and there's some people that don't want the labels, and what comes with it. So I can fully appreciate it can be very hard, I think, for teachers to be able to sometimes help, especially when I suppose some parents might not want the help or think that they need it, and I mean, I think majority of parents do. I mean, I always remember when my mum wanted a diagnosis, she went up to a teacher and said, "I think he's got autism." But
Really?
yeah, but I mean, the reply my mum got was completely the opposite of what you would say, which was, he's not got autism, he's just naughty. And that was what my mum was told. And it's like, that's the sort of the last thing I think a parent would be more offended by that than actually someone going, "You ever considered maybe your son might have, or your daughter might have autism or some condition?"
Yeah.
Because I think my mum was more offended by the fact that someone just went up to her and went, "No, he's just naughty." I suppose that brings me on to my next question then, just a little bit about you. I mean, what was it like growing up for yourself? Did you hear about conditions a lot? Did you have any conditions or anything that made yourself different?
I don't know. I think as a child I was quite hyperactive. There's a great moment. Who is it? Ken Robinson, who says that he didn't get diagnosed with ADHD because it wasn't popular back then, and I think there's a good element where I was quite hyperactive as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, more than most, that probably would have led me towards that had we had a sort of the SEN system we had today. But I think that I had a good support network around me that managed to support me through that, in terms of just regulating myself and keeping myself focused and energized in the right direction. I think being aware of conditions, I think that's something that's quite hard as a young person. I definitely think that when I was in school growing up, anyone that had any kind of special needs were sort of segregated from the group in some ways. So I remember a few, young people in my year group, especially in secondary school, often they were taught separately. They'd miss out on certain subjects, and it was just kind of not really talked about, and no one really wanted to kind of mention it as something. It was sort of like don't talk about it, don't talk about where they're going, don't talk about why they don't come to French. And it was a really weird kind of situation where not talking about it almost made it more stigmatized than talking about it. Like, I think that we've done a lot more in recent years to celebrate things like days that celebrate mental health, and National Society is so much more prominent now, that I'd hope that conversation was happening a lot more. But yeah, I think that was the big thing growing up, was just feeling like being different was something that we couldn't really talk about, or having additional needs. But I think we've grown so much since then as a society. We talk about mental health so much more. And your point earlier about the pandemic, I think that's made people really aware of mental health and understanding each other and being social, and how important socialization is to all of us as a kind of as humanity, really, more than anything, and being more understanding of those that find it harder to be social. I think that's taught us a lot. Or those that find it harder to get up in the morning, or to have that strong sense of mental well-being. I think it has taught us a lot about ourselves, I think, and more compassion.
There's probably people before the pandemic that may not have believed in mental health, just thought, well, get on with it, sort of man up. I heard that quite a lot. And I think a lot of those people are probably thinking now, actually, sort of get it, especially because it's a situation that we've never been in. And I actually think in some degree that the people that do have the conditions probably were more equipped, ready for it than the people that didn't. So for them it's like, but for some people it's like, well, this is what I've been feeling my whole life. So and I don't know if you agree or not, but I know some autistic people have obviously benefited from it as well, because if they're in a mainstream school that they don't necessarily enjoy going into, or they're not getting that socialization, and now they're being homeschooled by their parents. I know some kids, not all, but I know some kids that have actually felt proper suited in that environment versus school. In my opinion, I still would like the child to go back to school because it's about that socialization for me. Don't get me wrong, it's great that they're happy at home and they're learning at home and they're doing all that stuff, but you almost have to transfer those back into the school environment, otherwise he's going to miss out on a lot of other stuff, which is always my worry. I mean, do you feel autistic people get enough support in the world and at school in general?
I think our support services in schools are so much better than they've ever been. I think that the training for our SENCOs in mainstream schools and teaching assistants and teachers, I think it's getting to a place now where we're really understanding of kids that maybe need something a bit different. And I don't think anyone's sitting there waiting for a diagnosis anymore. I think people know, professionals know, and everyone I talk to, okay, they might need something extra. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to look up online. I'm going to put some visuals in place. I'm just going to make sure the routines are really consistent. I'm going to talk to the parents. I think that's where our strength really lies now, is that people are able to identify and spot small signs early, and they know, and they're talking about conditions. I can't imagine a teacher would ever come into teaching like I did as an NQT and not know some basics about how to support young people with autism, or know where to go if they need that help. And that's just in 10 years. I think that it's phenomenal. I think for me, I think when you ask that question and is the support there, I think my mind automatically goes to post 19, and that sort of, even though EHCPs are written to be 19 to 25, you know, the support isn't really there still, and there's so much more work to do in that age group of when you've left college or when you're about to leave college. Who's going to be there to support you and how you're going to be looked after? Because if you've grown up with a special school that's really supported you and thought about every step of the way, there's a huge burden to get everything right for that child at that last few years, and not have them just be reliant on their parents and their family. And then I think it just kind of, I wouldn't say deteriorates, but the support services available post 25, if you are a young person who really struggles, I think aren't really there. I think that they're so need dependent and so dependent on the people that you've had advocate for you in your early life, to whether you're actually able to access and you know, the support services into early adult life. And I know even as a young adult myself at 25, I needed a lot of support from my family, you know, and I just do think there's more work we could do to really help and support, and charities are incredible at that. And I know we're really lucky both having national charities, but also local charities that do an incredible amount supporting adults with additional needs. But I think we could do more. And I think that you know, relying on the odd charity and the postcode lottery of where you grow up, I think it isn't fair. And I think that there is more we could do to really make sure that we can help, you know, so many more young people do really well in their early adult life, particularly that difficult period when, you know, I would struggle to have figured out what to do if I didn't have the support around me at 19, 20, 21, you know, and that's what we've got to get right, I think, more. Because I see it in you know, the most successful people that I know with autism that have got jobs that are really fulfilling, that are really doing an incredible amount of work every single day, you know, that it makes me really sad to think there are young people that just because they didn't get the support, or people like, you know, yourself having someone like John, you know, or what I hope to bring from my kids, if that wasn't in place, it does make me really sad to think that they wouldn't bring all that they can to the world, and that, you know, that I think that's a bit of a disappointment, you know, if that would ever happen.
Yeah, and I think it does happen, you know, as you say. You know, I remember turning 16, you know, maybe it was 18, when cams sort of stopped, and it was just like, oh, okay, you know, it's like basically open the door, here's the world, bye. And it's like, oh, but how does the world work? How does it function? And it's like, oh, not our problem anymore. That's how it sort of felt for me. And it can be really disheartening, you know, because if you go through the educational system, you know, feeling let down, you know, and then you sort of look forward to later on in life, you know, getting a job, going to work, making some money, and then that system then lets you down. You know, it's very fortunate that I've had a supportive network behind me, because as we both know, you know, there's some kids out there that don't have that, you know, and if I didn't have the people like John or my mum or my family in my life, you know, it could have easily been a different story. So yeah, I think you're dead right. You know, especially when it comes to employment, I think the fact that there's still only 16% of people with autism in full-time work, and hasn't changed for 10 years, and obviously this is post-pandemic figures. It worries me what it will be after. It really does. So yeah, it's like the educational side is, I think, you know, exclusions, as we know, are probably still way too high. But I think the educational system is taking the measures that it needs to improve and be able to support young people. And I think it's probably about time that the employers and the government, you know, look at the, okay, that's school, but what happens when they leave? What do you think all schools could do differently?
And this is where some of my research at the moment is leading me towards. I think there's so many badges, awards, systems interventions that have got shiny labels on them. And I think it's become a bit commercialized and a bit too much. And I think that the one thing that schools should rely more on is the instinct they have in wanting to get things right for their individual kids. And it's not going to be in a really tidy, neat package in 6 sessions. They're going to suddenly be, magically different. It's going to come from spending the time, and it's going to be a long time, but spending that time, dedicating time every single day to a young person, and recognizing that it might not have to be something huge, that it could just be something as simple as saying good morning to a young person and bringing them into the classroom, just talking through their day of what's going on, what's different, what might have changed. And that, it takes time and it takes a lot of energy and effort to do it every day, but that's going to have that profound impact. And that's right for that kid at that time. So I think that schools should trust that more. And everything we've said today, about listening to the family, if that's something that could just be as simple as helping them take their coat, put it away, and just saying, right, do you know what, Mrs. Bloggs isn't in today, but we've got Mr. Sims, and you like him because he teaches IT and he's really good at that. And it's that kind of conversation that just, it's almost like the precursor to preparing a young person for a day. And I think that isn't going to come in a neat package. It isn't going to have a name. It isn't going to have a room and a sort of a workbook that we need to rely more on, because we know that stuff works really well for our kids. So I think it's getting to know our individual kids and trusting our instincts when we listen to them and really understand what works for them. But also having some measure and balance. I can't remember who it was. There was someone that I met once that said that sometimes we can take things too far. So if a young person is really loves dinosaurs, if you make the world about dinosaurs, all they're ever going to talk about is dinosaurs. So it's having that balance at the same time, that don't make everything about their own special interest. It's encouraging them to try new things, which you can do. But I think it's getting to know them, but bringing in the wider world into that as well.
Really insightful for me. This is why I do the interviews, because I might have an idea, but obviously when you speak to other people about it as well, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. And then you just sort of, I suppose my last question then for you would be, what's I suppose the biggest frustration that you have, around autism, SEND? And I don't mean so much obviously the conditions, but I just mean, it could be ignorance of people. It could be, as we've discussed, what happens to these kids when they leave school. What schools could be doing better, what schools are doing bad. What sort of what do you think is the biggest issue around autism?
I think it's, for me, I think that my biggest frustration, I think, is understanding and support for autistic adults, and particularly autistic people as they get older, or people with autism who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. I think we're amazingly tolerant and supportive, and we can use the word tolerant because it's a horrible word in some ways, but we're patient and kind towards a 4 or 5 year old that's coming up with quite significant challenging behavior or symptoms that we know they need support with, and everyone will want to rush and support them. But we're far less patient if someone with 40 or 50 who's in the supermarket or in the streets. And I think that is something that we need to get better at as a society, is that support and kindness and understanding, because I think we lose that as, people with autism get older. And it is almost, for me, that conversation that, if you can have empathy for someone when they're 4 or 5, this young person is going to grow up. They are going to become 40 or 50 one day. So have the same empathy, find that for them as they get older. So it might be that you might have to wait a little bit longer in the line for someone that's trying to find, the right credit card or something, or trying to remember their PIN number or whatever it might be. But find that empathy that you would for the, 4-year-old who's going to take ages to, sort something out that he's dropped. It's that, I think, that we need a bit more of.
Yeah, I again completely agree. It's that sort of physicalness again, isn't it? You know, of what we can
Yeah.
actually physically see. And when we see a child, we see, just like when we look at dogs or animals, we see this sort of defenseless, you know,
Yeah.
cute little thing that we can pick up. And as we get older, I think the phrase as well, you're old enough to know better, is also really harmful, because
Yeah.
what we're sort of saying is, you know, like people that forget their pins or might react a certain way, you know, we might go, well, come on, they're old enough to know better. But actually,
Yeah.
we're old enough to know better, that we should actually give them the same empathy, as you said, that we would give to a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old, you know. So, and we don't know what's going on in their life or what conditions they may have. So I think as I think you raise a really good point. I think it goes back to that sort of Caroline Flack, you know, if you can be anything in the world, you know, be kind. And I think,
Like that.
yeah, I think you're just so on point with that. But I'd like to thank you for your time, Tom. It's been really insightful for me. It's flown by. And you know, thank you for your time.
No worries. Thank you, Max. It's been lovely talking to you.